Hello and welcome to the 1916 podcast. I'm Tommaso here with Armand Johnston, and Watches and Wonders looms large. At this point, we're in the silly season where anything and everything could happen at the show. We often find that sometimes the predictions are more fun than the outcomes, so we are indulging today. This is like the early stage of the baseball hot stove when your third-tier Midwestern team could theoretically sign Juan Soto. Of course, this is an interactive experience, so if you have any questions, comments, or show topic suggestions in the future, send them to podcasts at the1916company.com. Armand, okay, we're going to go whole hog. Let's start with the big boys. This is now like SIHH merged with Baselworld. Watches and Wonders has Patek and it has Rolex. Let's talk about Patek Philippe. What would we like to see? What do we think we're going to see?
Let's do it. So I hold Patek very close to the chest in terms of my appreciation for the brand, in terms of how I understand the brand and what I like from the brand. You know, there's two things that I would really like to see. More watches with complication pairings, and what I mean by that is something like a 5960. To me, a 5960 is a perfect watch. It has an annual calendar and a chronograph with a, meaningful totalizer. Absolutely adore the piece. I would like to see more interesting complication pairings. The world time chronos I think are really cool, despite the fact that, I don't think you necessarily need a chrono on a world timer. I just like a chrono. And the other thing that I get ahead of myself. Something like the 5326G I think is a really cool complication combination as well. Your dual time with annual calendar as paired with it. Kind of the low-hanging fruit that we talk about is a pusherless case, right? I would really love to see Patek start out with, honestly, if they started out with a perpetual, it'd be murderously accepted. But I think it's more Patek to start out with something like an annual on something like that. So a fully crown-controlled annual calendar would be really cool for me to see from the brand. And it would just show that they're reaching into further into the future than kind of their classicism will allow.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this idea that Patek might explore different ways of controlling a perpetual calendar. Now, it's no secret that Patek is very traditional in this regard. They use the Grand Levier system, so a big lever and a program wheel, and that's been the way of making a perpetual calendar for a long time. On the one hand, it has the advantage of keeping the watch relatively slim, and it allows you to adjust the individual calendar indications separately if you wish to do so. But if you look at what they did with the 5224, the Calatrava travel time back in 2023, they moved away from the way they'd traditionally done travel time watches. Instead of having pushers on the opposite side of the case from the crown, they made all of the functions controllable through the crown. So you can hack the watch, you can set the watch generally, you can set the two time zones separately, all through the crown, and it cleaned up the case flank, and it made a really compact watch possible. So I would love to see a white gold version of that this year. Rose gold is not for everyone, and it's a pretty big watch, but I'm getting ahead of my skis here. I would like to maybe imagine that they revisit the perpetual calendar in a way that makes it a little bit easier to set. And I think their big breakthrough with the inline calendar required a lot of patents. It was a very complex system, but underlying, it's still a program wheel and a grand lever. So I would like to see some movement in that direction. And even if it can't all be set through the crown, I think there's a strong case to be made that in this day and age, not requiring a tool and just putting a button on the case in some way could make this a whole lot easier.
Agreed, totally. I think that's a delicate balance, though, because, we've seen, kind of button case correctors in the, 40s, 50s, and 60s being those little domes almost.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a bit of while I like it on certain vintage pieces, that's a bit of a case killer. You know what I mean?
I thought the best implementation of this is how Blancpain did its correctors under the lugs.
Under lug correctors, yes. Absolutely love that. And I think Blancpain was the first to do that.
And they also built in a failsafe so you can't use them during the danger zone. So I think these are two advances that really go hand in hand to make it a little bit easier to set the Patek calendars. And they'll also include a little bit of a failsafe just so you don't accidentally set them in the danger zone, either blocking it or making the mechanism so robust it doesn't matter, like the Moser Perpetual. So that's something we'd both like to say. I think more reimagining of the perpetual calendar, because it is such, since the 1526 and the 1518, it is such an iconic Patek Philippe complication, and it's a mark of their past innovation and prominence in this space that when I think of perpetual calendars, this is still the first brand that comes to mind. And I feel like we've seen a flood of new models in recent years. Now it's maybe time to look a little bit at the inside of the watch and think about how a perpetual calendar mechanism could change, for the next 100 years of Stern family ownership.
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. When I think of a perpetual calendar, I think of Patek as well, and it's just something with the classicism, just something with the amount of perpetuals that they have made, and in very classic sizes, in very classic case designs, in very classic layouts, and it's a technology that, they do continue to push. You mentioned the inline perpetual. They do produce retrograde perpetuals, split second perpetuals. So those are always very cool to see and very evocative of the brand itself.
Yeah, I think it's important to note Patek has not been absent on perpetual innovation, but it's generally been in the display. With the 5207, they introduced instantaneous jumping. They've had retrograde perpetuals in the calendar since the 90s, the inline calendar of 2021. Awesome piece. Now some of the underlying guts, I would like to see that revisited. Another thing I would like to see is a style that they began to explore in earnest for the first time in a while with the 4947 annual calendar. This idea of a dress watch in steel on a factory steel bracelet. Not a Nautilus, not an Aquanaut, not a Cupidus, but a genuine dress watch in steel on a factory steel bracelet. I think that's an incredible idea. I would love to see this expanded.
I like the 4947 1A a lot. It's handsome. It's easy to wear. It's truly unisex, despite the 4 indication on the reference. I actually, mostly gentlemen have reached out to me about this piece.
Yeah, a great piece. And I think if you think back only a few decades, this is the same size as the 5035 and the 5036, the 90s.
Yep.
This is what was considered to be a men's size in the past. It's a 38 millimeter watch, and I think those others were 37. So very close to what was historically considered a gentleman's watch. It would be really great to see more Calatrava-style watches, even if they're not complications, offered in steel on steel bracelets, because as Patek moves away from the steel 5711s, it's got a bit more steel budget to spend elsewhere. It's 20% of production that is steel. I think more steel dress watches on matching bracelets could be a really cool way to do that.
I think a really cool steel Calatrava on a bracelet would be fantastic. Honestly, I know it would increase the price significantly, but a white gold Calatrava on a bracelet would be great too. Something that's simple and clean and maybe even inspired by something like so I guess it's a 7-link bracelet on like the 2526.
What I would like to
Full high
see,
polish.
I would like to see him take a big risk. Steel watch, steel bracelet, but Milanese style.
Oh, that would be killer.
You don't see steel Milanese bracelets.
That would be really cool. And I would take it a step further. Do you go flat end links?
I think you do.
I think you absolutely could. And I don't love that look on everything. Every Patek with flat end links that I have seen looks perfect to me for some reason.
That's cool. I like that a lot. I would also say that at this point, there's no pressing need to replace the 5167, but it has been a while. That model came out in 2007, and it has been upgraded through the years with a new movement. It's got the 26330, but I feel as though if that's going to be the regular offering, the entry-level sports watch in the catalog, it could do with a reimagining. I don't necessarily think it needs to get any bigger. There's a 42 for people who want that. But it would be fun to see what a new generation Aquanaut would look like in a world where we're probably not going to get a steel 5811. And the Cupidus plays to a very different wrist size and taste and style. So I would like to see a new Aquanaut and really imagine what could change. Because I have to say, very few watches launched in 2007 have aged that well. They were generally, it was a period of huge watches that didn't go the distance. This one, I mean, it still looks contemporary and there's no pressing need to replace it, but I would love to see it revisited. If they've got any bright ideas about how to advance the state of the art, that'd be a cool place to do it.
I kind of expect that to come in 2020. 2027.
The anniversary?
The anniversary, exactly, because the 2026 is the 50th anniversary of the Nautilus, and we know that's going to be something major. And I also think, being that they released Cubitus recently, being that, they've revamped, they've discontinued and revamped the 5711 to the 5811, I think we may see a pause in sports line this year. I do think we'll see an expansion on the Cubitus line. So take that statement back. I think we'll see expansion on Cubitus, and I don't think we'll see anything but discontinuations from Aquanaut and Nautilus this year. But I am very much on board with having an update to the 5167 because you're right, nothing quite has aged in the same way. Arguably Rolex cases haven't really changed that much since 2007. So, certain things have, in that capacity, they have, but you're absolutely right. The trends of that time did not age well at all.
And look at how many different Aquanaut models existed between the first one in 1997 and the 5167 10 years later. We got not only did we get a new core model, but there were mid-size, full-size, men's, women, bracelet, strap, quartz, mechanical. It's almost like Rolex Submariners in the 50s where there were so many varieties. You could see 4 different Submariner references in a case at a dealer at the same time in period. And so we got a new core Aquanaut after 10 years on the market, and it looks like that watch will now have gone 20 years between redesigns. So I guess 2027 is a year to mark on your calendar because most of us expected we'd see a new core Aquanaut in 2017. So it could be a very interesting year. What do I think we're going to get this year? Well, we all both agree that there are going to be new Cubitus references. I don't necessarily think there's going to be new models in the sense that, I don't know, a chronograph is going to show up. But I wouldn't be shocked to see new dial colors.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a purple dial on the 5821, a steel watch purple dial with a matching purple strap.
You're dialing my number.
That would be so much fun. And I don't think you can stay mad at something that puts a smile on your face. And I think the perspective people need with the Cubitus is A, it doesn't seem that big when you encounter it in person. It seems a little more like a 42. 2, it's delightfully thin and flat. And if you can give people more options for wearing it casually, I think it makes sense to make a sports watch more casual rather than moving in the other direction.
I carry the Cubitus torch proudly. I absolutely adore the 5821/1A, the steel green dial version. I think the watch is awesome. I feel like it's certainly a watch you need to have try on the wrist. Is it a little bit big? Yes. It is nowhere near the size that the case measurement suggests. And I don't think it wears close to that either. It does, fundamentally wear larger than the 5711. I'll give you all that levity in the world, but there's something about it that does strike me as a lot of fun, and gosh, I would love to wear one.
And so I think there's room here to do things that are a little bit more fun. Like back in 1997, ostensibly for the 25th anniversary of the original Royal Oak, AP came out with a bunch of candy-colored Royal Oak offshores with dials and straps to match. And we've never had the lime one, much to my dismay. But I think you could do something like that with a purple strap and a purple dial, or a yellow dial and a yellow strap, or an orange dial and an orange strap. I think you can do all that. A lavender dial and a lavender strap on a Cubitus. But it has to be the steel model because I think we need to explore its strap aspect. It would look so good on a strap.
I could definitely see this watch in given the 5711 white dial treatment with the dark rhodium markers, dark rhodium hands, white dial. I can absolutely see that being the case. I would love to see steel salmon with dark rhodium as well. Ooh. Now, salmon has been relegated kind of to platinum for the most part with Patek, or white gold, depending on reference. But, there was a Neptune, I believe it was a 5080, not 5088.
Yeah. No, there was you're absolutely right. There was a Neptune with a salmon dial, and it was a steel watch on a steel bracelet, and it was awesome.
So cool. It's one of my favorite Neptunes, and I think pulling from things like that with those types of colors is very Patek. It's very self-referential in a really good way, and while still kind of pushing the envelope forward in a new line.
Okay, we got a lot of brands at Richemont. Armand, where do you want to start?
Gosh, you know what? Let's start with Lange.
What would you like to see from Lange?
I would like to see
A shaped watch, a steel watch, a sports watch.
I would like to see an update to the Odysseus. And I'm surprised to hear me say that because I think there's enough Odysseus's currently. I'd like to see a colored metal version. I want to see a colored metal version of Odysseus. I don't care if it's on a strap or a bracelet. I prefer it on a bracelet, don't get me wrong. But I want to see something in rose or yellow. I really do. Honey gold would be insane. I don't expect it, but it would be so, so cool. I don't know exactly what dial. Of course, I'm going to say black dial, but...
That's a good idea, though. Hark back to the original and very rare dotograph in yellow gold.
Yeah.
It was a black dial, and it looked incredible.
And the 39 millimeter was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that watch, Waco told me that's his dream watch. The yellow gold dotograph is Waco's, the guy who could have any watch he wants.
And has.
Yeah, so I would say that's a great place to start. If you do it in yellow gold, black dial. If you do it in rose gold, maybe a brown dial.
Yeah, that would be cool. I could definitely see that.
And start with like the white gold model now. Use the tooling on a different type of gold.
Honey gold lumen.
You've already got the straps. You got a rubber strap that fits to a gold Odysseus. Please make this happen.
Honey gold lumen Odysseus,
Gold
Tim.
lumen. Oh my gosh. I would love to see a lumen treatment on the Odysseus. I think that might be the best idea that emerges from this recording.
That would be really cool.
Maybe do it the way Damasco does. Just loom the whole dial and do it in relief. Backlight it.
Yes, I know exactly. Yes. That would be insanely cool. That's kind of... I don't mean this in any direction. That's kind of not Lange. That's kind of more Bell and Rossi.
But then at the same time, you see what Lange has done with the lumens, and you may be like, okay, maybe the line has already been crossed.
Yeah.
It is a Bell and Rossi thing to do, but it's a Damasco thing too. I just feel like, look, Damasco is German, Lange is German. It's acceptable.
Yeah.
The norm has been established. Germans don't like to stand out from the crowd, so they're now going to be part of that.
I can picture it too. Like I can see it in my mind's eye.
And I'm sorry if you're German and you're a very individualist person. I'm stereotyping here. But so that would be a really good, I think that's a great idea.
I think I too would like to see, and I understand the fundamentals behind it, but I would like to see a smaller Zeitwerk.
Okay. Like how small can we make
40 millimeter. That's all it needs to be. 40 millimeter. And you have to shave thickness a little bit because that would be a bit of a Rolo on the wrist if it weren't, if the thickness wasn't shaved down.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're going to have to make some compromises to make that possible. So with the Zeitwerk, you got like three things that you've got to contain. You've got to have jumping digital time, a remontoir, and enough energy to drive the whole system. So this caliber L043 that's in the Zeitwerk right now is so big that I don't think you could build a 40 millimeter watch around it. And I'm not sure you can adjust the distance between the jumping digital discs. As much as I would love to see this, I think it's almost like it's almost like the reason a Chihuahua can't have like a bulldog's puppy. There's just some physical constraints in the nature of the beast. This can never happen. It would be a disaster.
So looking at the L0431 or it's 043, it is a 36 millimeter diameter. So you're absolutely right. A 40 millimeter case on that would be impossible.
And now it's got two mainsprings, which means there's even more to contain. So I just don't think this would work.
I think you'd need to do a new caliber. I think you'd need to entirely revamp the caliber and probably get rid of the constant force.
So I would also say that if you're going to do this, you have to decide whether you want triple digital time. Do you want the hours, tens of minutes, and minutes? I love the idea of Lange doing a smaller jumping time watch, but I feel like now we're into FP Journe vagabondage territory where you have to choose whether you want wandering and jumping hours, jumping seconds and jumping hours, jumping minutes and jumping hours, but you can't have all of them at once at the same time in the same vagabondage because the case isn't big enough.
Yeah.
So do you do jumping hours or jumping minutes? Like I could see a world where jumping minutes is more interesting than jumping hours, and you actually have unlike a lot of jump hours, you have a center minute or a center hours hand, and then a jumping minute.
Jumping minute. I don't hate that combination at all. I think that's kind of cool, actually. And I mean, to this, to your point with earlier when you mentioned making the Daytona a line, the Zeitwerk already is a line.
Yeah,
that could fit into Zeitwerk very easily.
Yeah, there's a minute repeater, there's a striking, there's several different
models.
There's a date, there's several different versions of the standard watch. So, yeah, expanding the Zeitwerk line to include something that's maybe not so ponderous. Remember, the Zeitwerk originally came out in 2009, right at the tail end of the bigger is better trend. So by the standards of 2009, when we had 48 and 50 millimeter Hublots, I guess, 42 was not all that large. Today, I would like to see maybe a revisitation of this concept to see where the Zeitwerk could go in the future, and I totally agree with you on that. I think a jumping seconds watch might be the coolest thing they could do in the Zeitwerk collection, even if the rest of it's entirely conventional.
That would be so cool to see a jumping seconds, like a digital jumping seconds. Yeah, now, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. Journe did the Vagabondage 3 by building upon the single-second Remontoir, right?
Yeah, if you've already got a jumping second display that's built on top of a constant force device that unloads every second, you could see it on the Tourbillon, you could see it on the Chronomet Optimum. That's basically what's going on the Vagabondage 3. So it's not such a huge technological leap, whereas if you're looking at something that does not start from a 1 second Remontoir basis, you've got to kind of scratch build it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would be in favor of Lange exploring this. It would be really cool and worthwhile. So in terms of other Richemont brands, I think the best thing that could happen to Roger Dubuis is to open up a model line that's basically just its classic models from the 90s and early 2000s.
Oh my gosh. Talk more. Yes, 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 please. Sympathy cases.
Yeah, a place for the sympathy, a place for the homage to live, an olive branch to people who were there at the beginning and would have stayed on board if there had been at least some place for them to find refuge in the current collection, which has gone all in at trying to out-Richard Mr. Miele. And look, to that end, it's an impressive manufacturer. They're making parts of the watch, like the hairspring, like the basic movement components that Miele cannot construct. But the size and the shape and, the bombast of it doesn't necessarily appeal to someone who would have owned the Condottiere.
I think when people think of Roger Dubuis, they don't think of, well, I should say when people think, when collectors think of modern day Roger Dubuis, I don't think they look past the surface. I think they see the design and just assume that this is quote unquote not a real manufacturer anymore, not doing things in the way that other brands are doing things, or just buying movements and throwing them into cases and not manufacturing quite as much as they do.
Yeah, they're making almost the whole watch at Roger Dubuis.
It's remarkable, really. Like, they do a lot in-house.
And they don't get enough credit for it because it's been such, with the Pirelli sponsorship, with the size of the watch, with the open dials, it's easy to get lost in the image of it and forget the substance is so there in a way that even some of the other Autologerie Richemont brands are not. So I would just love to see a place where someone who's got a Sympathy by Retrograde perpetual calendar from the 1990s, who's got an homage double retrograde with a La Manna base movement, this person can find a way to come back into the brand and not just focus on buying things that are decades old. You can still have things like the Couture, you can still have the Excaliburs, you can still have open dials and more than one tourbillon, but let's at least find a way amid the Pirellis and the Lamborghinis of the world and the Excaliburs of the world to revisit those original watches and make them a permanent part of the collection.
Yeah, no, I'm super on board with that. I love that idea.
Okay, IWC, what would we like to see at IWC? Probably one of the strongest Richemont brands at the moment.
Yeah, I would like to see less derivatives.
Okay.
I really would. And I don't mean that as a negative because, listen, I like fun color pilot's watches. I like different dial variations of Portuguesers. I like seeing things that I remember in the case when I started here, just a little bit different. I don't like seeing that year after year after year after year. We all want variety. We all want updates and different dial colors. I just want to see less derivatives from IWC specifically. I would put Panerai in a very similar camp. Both brands that I like very much and get excited about new releases.
It feels like it's been a long time since IWC has spent any time on dive watches. And the Aquanaut collection, it was probably next in line to receive attention back when IWC was still devoting one model year to one model line redesign. They used to do the Portuguese, the Pilot Watch, the Portofino, the Ingenieur, the Aquanaut. Each one would have its own model year when the whole line would be redesigned, which meant roughly once a decade you'd see a top-to-bottom redesign. But the 2017 Da Vinci scrambled that. Da Vinci by itself wasn't a strong enough line to justify dedicating an entire model year solely to that. And because they went back to the old Hanno Bircher Von Dome hinge lug design from the 80s, they were launching a type of Da Vinci that was even more niche in its appeal than the prior Da Vinci. So
very well said.
Allegedly, the year after that, 2018, was going to be the year of the Aquanaut, but they were so concerned by the inability of the Da Vinci to carry 2017 that they second-guessed whether the Aquanaut itself deserved a full model year, full line redesign. So instead, we saw a revisitation several times in the last decade of the Pilot's watches and the Portuguesers.
And Aquatimer is such an awesome model line. You know, we talked about this in our last episode, I think. This external ratcheting safety bezel with an internal attachment is so cool. It's so much fun. And it's, you know, it's a fun fidget on the wrist. You know, it's something that has direct use. It's easy to use. It's, you know, it's idiot proof, and it looks good on the watch. You know, I think when we think about dive watches, we think about an external rotating bezel, and without that, it looks very naked. I think IWC did a really good job of keeping this bezel in proportion to dive bezel proportions, but without making the lack of external rotation feel naked on the watch. You could also, now hear me out on this, you could also do a double scale with an engraving on the external portion of the bezel itself, as well as, you know, have some sort of connection with the internal. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in Aquatimer, and I would love to see that. The thing with these that they have to be careful with is their current generation is a good size. It needs to be slightly refined in certain ways, I think, maybe slightly shorter lugs, maybe slightly thinner cases, but they can't go out of their way to make it too big. Definitely, it's borderlining on it now, and oftentimes when we see IWC update something, it gets a little bigger.
And I would say that what they need to focus on is maybe making more compact Aquatimers, but not creating a retro watch. I don't think we need to go back to 1967. I don't think we need another vintage style diver in the market. I like the fact that they're a little bit quirky. Let's keep them that way. Pare down the thickness, pare down the size. Let's maybe revisit some of the design themes that worked so well with the GSTs in the late 90s and the early to mid 2000s. I think if there's any place in the IWC collection to bring back some of the best elements of the GST, the Aquatimer collection is that place. I would love to see, just as a flagship of a renewed commitment to the Aquatimer, a Deep 4. It's been a long time since the Deep 3.
That would be very, very cool. I have to just make a comment. The Aquatimer collection is priced remarkably well. Like this is really like shockingly good pricing until you get to the perpetual calendar, which you know, for obvious reasons is a little more expensive. But you know, the most expensive piece other than those perpetuals are the Galapagos Islands and the Charles Darwin, which are both really cool watches, coming in at 11,100, and I'm shocked.
Yeah, look what you get for $6,100 in the current Aquatimer. You get that unique safe dive bezel, you get a 5-day power reserve, you get quick release straps, but the quick release is built into the strap, so it'll take standard aftermarket straps. You're not locked into a proprietary strap. You get a really strong fundamental design language that's easy to read day or night. It functions beautifully as a visible instrument. You get a couple of different color options. Bracelet is a $900 upcharge, which is pretty reasonable as this industry goes. And so you've got this sort of Seamaster priced watch from IWC that feels like it's like one rung up from Omega in the pecking order in the watch industry.
Yep.
So now you're in the same universe, you know, granted the same universe, but same universe as the Sidereal Scafusia, you know, mechanisms by Kurt Klaus, genuinely exotic high-end watches. So that's kind of an exciting place to be with that Aquatimer. And whereas something like the Ingenieur, which is, you know, the same movement for well into 5 figures, you might have a little bit of a reservation. For $6,100, I slap my money down, I buy that, and I get the 8-year warranty with it.
Yeah, I'm blown away at this pricing, and it's so funny, like looking at retail pricing after not looking at retail pricing for a long time, and this is example of a really good, well-priced timepiece that is grab and go. It also doesn't televise itself as something outrageously expensive. You know, the $6,100 version, you can get a blue dial on a blue strap, black dial on a black strap, and it's very casual. It's very easy to wear. It's not a look at me watch, and I dig that.
Yeah, and it's a very different looking dive watch. It doesn't look like a sub. It doesn't look like a Seamaster. It's not trying to be a vintage reedition. It's got the integrity of being its own thing and comfortable in its own stainless steel skin. The one thing I can tell, though, is on the Aquatimer page on IWC's website, I scroll up, I scroll down, and it's by far the shortest scroll of any collection they've got.
That's a benefit to me. That is a benefit. You know, this is limited SKUs. There's 10 SKUs in the Aquatimer collection. I think that is great.
Okay. Cartier. I would just like to see... Cartier is probably, from a design standpoint and a discipline standpoint, the Richemont watch brand that has it most together. They are now second only to Rolex in watch sales in Switzerland. They've done it with a few fundamental, iconic model lines. They have robust resale on most of the recent pieces, too. They have the 8-year warranty, even on watches that cost less than $5,000. And there's that sense that the watch will never be obsolete when you're buying a Santos or you're buying a tank or, you're getting a tank variation. I mean, it's robust in a way that probably no other model line other than Rolex truly is. Without trying too hard, a simple watch can sell for strong money, hold it over the long term, and be regarded as something genuinely elite, even though Cartier is a mass market brand. So I would say that what I want to see from Cartier is not so much a revolution, because they're doing everything right, but bring back some of the stuff that's worked in the past. I hear guys talking about the Calibre de Cartier Diver and the Roadster nonstop. They're great watches to sell and great watches to own, and there's a lot of energy behind their revival.
I was going to say, give me a Roadster. Give me a wooden dial Roadster. Give me any Roadster. I would say after seeing the Tortue mono pusher kind of get reintroduced, I think it opened the door for a new Roadster, and I will be very excited when that comes about. And listen, let's continue with the Richemont trend. Let's maintain the originality of having the quick release strap, of the interchangeable system, shipping the strap with the bracelet version, giving your options. Let's maintain that. And I think a reasonably sized, actually same size as the original, maybe a slight change up to the case design here and there, slight notes, so to speak, would be perfect.
That would be an awesome revival, even more so if they offer it in titanium, even more so if they bring over some of the bracelet features from the Santos, the quick switch and the smart link.
Yeah.
That would be hugely appreciated. I think every watch on a bracelet that's coming out these days needs some sort of micro adjust built in, so let's get that too. And yeah, let's bring them back. Calibre de Cartier Diver, probably the thinnest and finest mainstream dive watch I've encountered. People do not realize how thin it is when you measure its midsection, or how well it fits despite being a 42, or how silky that ball-bearing bezel was. This was like the best dive watch that no one knew about, and not because it didn't come from a big prominent brand, but because people just don't think dive watch when they think Cartier. And for the time it was available, go out and get the ceramic bezel blue dial version, which is absolutely stunning. Easy to wear, comfortable, even fits well on a woman's wrist, and everything about it feels and looks premium. Plus, I cannot get over how thin it is. So yeah, Cartier, stay the course. Just bring back some favorites.
Yeah.
Vacheron.
So we've talked about 222 for a while. Mm-hmm. We've talked about overseas. We've talked about patrimony. We've talked about a few things here and there. I want, and not that I dreadfully want them to expand on overseas. I don't necessarily want them to. I want a deep stream. I want a deep stream colorway in the overseas again.
Ooh, okay. Just for our friends out there in cyberspace, Deep Stream was a development term used for the steel-cased titanium bezel watch that came out in the late 2000s. It was never official, but everyone still uses it. Deep Stream is always steel-cased titanium bezel.
Yep. And I would love to see them start it with a perpetual. Would love to see the Deep Stream perpetual in the overseas Gen 3 case. I think it would be awesome. I think Deep Stream in general, I think, has outsported the sport aspect of overseas in a great way. You know, it's a little darker, it's a little bit more rugged looking, and I think when you look at the slate dials that they generally do have paired with the perpetual, for example, has some yellow accents. I think that would be super cool. It sports up a classically dressy complication in the perpetual, and I think it would fit into the line remarkably well.
And you got to realize that in the second generation overseas, Vacheron did a Deep Stream perpetual calendar chronograph. So this is not some pie in the sky thought. So far, Generation 3 has not included a perpetual in a base metal case.
Right.
And it hasn't combined the perpetual calendar with a chronograph.
They had it in titanium, right? They had a titanium perpetual, right?
No, I don't think they did. Unless if I missed that, then I missed big. If that's out there, let me know. Because my thought was that we'd seen rose gold and we'd seen white gold. But we hadn't seen... Is that titanium?
It is.
That's white gold, isn't it?
This is white gold, is it?
Yeah, that's white gold.
Hold on. I know there is a titanium version. Give me one second.
If this is out there, guys, look, I don't catch everything. You know, I try to be that catcher who never misses the knuckleball, but every once in a while, no matter how good you are, it's just the nature of the knuckleball. The watch industry will throw you for some crazy breaks. I think there were two versions of the Everest.
If I imagine this, I'm going to be so angry with myself.
Was it like an auction watch or something?
No.
Because if I missed a titanium...
It's the tourbillon. Sorry, it's
okay.
the tourbillon.
Okay.
That was totally my fault. Yep.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, not a problem. So I was actually thinking about the overseas too, and I feel like with the arrival of a steel 222, the overseas is in danger of being upstaged by the 222. So you know what? Daddy's home. Bring back the 2000V.
Let's go. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Make that in titanium.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
That restores the overseas to the top.
Oh, man, I would love to see that. You know, the one downfall is that you couldn't do it with that slate dial.
That's true, but there could be new options.
Oh, but the slate looks so good with titanium. It was so good.
The slate could be good, but now we could try other things. We can have like a steel dial brushed from top to bottom.
Smoked crystal skeletonized dial.
Okay, smoked palladium.
Oh. Now we're talking. When you say words like palladium, when you say alternate materials, now we're talking.
And for you,
that is an idea.
For those of you who are listening and don't immediately register when you hear 2000V, the first year the third generation overseas was out, there was an ultra-thin time-only model with the JLC-based 1120 movement. And it was the closest thing the overseas ever came. It was the closest thing it ever had to a jumbo, to a real 15202, 16202, 5711 call and response.
And that's a perfect watch. It is a perfect watch.
Two hands, no date, ultra thin, but with all the other Generation 3 overseas refinements, the bracelet, the quick release, the display case back, all of it. So yeah, I think the time has come in a world where a steel 222 looks like the easy call. If you've got money for it, what do you buy? Do you buy a 4500V or do you buy the new 222? You skip the overseas. Most people are going to go for the 222.
Yeah, I think so. If you're not opposed to the kind of 70s design language, I think you're going to go 222 every time. It's a better wearing watch.
But in a world where a steel or titanium 2000V is in the collection, the order of things is reasserted.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see that.
Separately from that, I would like to see within the mainstream model line of the overseas, let's bring back the salmon dials. Remember from the first generation?
Yeah, I would love to. That would be incredible. That salmon fits in such a... Salmon goes with everything and nothing. And that's why I think it fits so well in white metal cases, in sports models, in dress models. It just goes because it doesn't.
And then in the dress watch world, either in the Traditionnel or the Patrimony collection, let's bring back the Chronomètre Royal. For decades, that was a long-running flagship in the Vacheron collection, having a genuine certified chronometer in a high horology lineup that's double certification, Geneva Seal and COSC. And I feel like the time has come to revisit this. For decades, it was always the flagship in the line. And with the overseas dominating all of the head, I mean, look, we've talked about nothing but the overseas so far. So let's get the dress watches back in the discussion. Let's bring back the Chronomètre Royal. Let's make it part of one of the existing model lines, because it often was part of an existing model line. It was rarely a standalone model line. And let's make it available in, titanium and steel, but charge a precious metal price. Make this something people covet. Make this something people will wait to acquire.
I think that's a great idea.
So yeah, Chronomètre Royal. In fact, Chronomètre Royal could be a version of the 1921, a steel or titanium cased 1921 with a chronometer certified movement.
Have they made a 1921 in steel yet? They haven't, have they?
Not in series.
Yeah, no. That would be very cool to see.
Okay, so this is what Vacheron. That's what we'd like for you. Piaget. My only hope for Piaget is that we just talk about Piaget.
The watches are just too damn thick.
Yeah, right. They're just too big. They're too thick.
Too big, too thick. They don't push the boundaries in getting thinner.
If only there were Piaget watches that fit the mold that people are begging for, thinner, smaller, more traditional, and easier to wear, with unisex options galore. If only Piaget had such a watch, or several.
Or we're known for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, Piaget, you do everything right. And it's like...
And zero appreciation.
I know. The guys, put up or shut up. This is what everyone's saying they want. Look at the Piaget model line. Check them out. I can't recommend anything other than a better marketing department.
And talk about gem setting. Piaget does gem setting remarkably well, too. It's, oh, gosh. What an underappreciated brand for what they do.
And I would also say that for Baume Mercier, I would say just maybe stronger design languages for watches like the Cliftons. Like, can you mentally picture a Baume Mercier Clifton or Clifton Club? Like, I picture something round with a white dial, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it when I think of Baume Mercier, honestly. Baume is not my favorite brand, and it's due to a lack of any true identity. When I was selling Baume at retail, the phrase that the rep would keep coming back to was, "It's a perfect watch to gift," and that is not complimentary to the brand, I don't think.
No, that's like saying that the appeal is broad but shallow. Like, can't go wrong, but you're more interested in avoiding rejection than inciting infatuation.
That's way better said than even the rep. That's exactly right with the brand. I agree with you. There needs to be something that is an anchor for them, because they are adrift.
And I would say they're one of the most international brands within Richemont.
Strangely,
because of the popularity in Asia. So here's what I would suggest for the West. Look at what Nomos did. Nomos doesn't have a whole lot of in-house design. Almost all of its models were farmed out to hip designers located around Europe, but especially Berlin.
Berlin, yeah.
So find these hip designers and bring some energy to the lineup by commissioning design from people who already have a track record of successful industrial design. Baume Mercier, 8-year warranty, 5-day power reserve. Great movements, great warranty coverage, and being a Richemont Group company, there will be parts and service forever, so you have the peace of mind. But now let's maybe focus on design. I would say other than the Riviera, the Rivieras are really quite good. It's the rest of the collection that needs to take on a love it or hate it approach for the Western markets. If you're selling fine in Asia, that's fine. Asia's its own world. But if you want these things to be, oddly enough, to have the kind of energy that Grand Seiko now has in the West, out of Asia but into the West, Grand Seiko watches are very idiosyncratic, distinctive. They take risks. They do special editions, maybe too many. But they try to find ways to provoke strong emotional responses. And if there's a problem with Baume Mercier's watches in the West, it's that they don't provoke strong emotional responses.
That's very fair. And it's funny you mentioned the Asian market. You know, Baume Mercier is Richemont's Longines.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. With the one difference that Longines has a little bit of a niche in pilot watches.
Fair.
That Baume would love to have in the West.
Yeah.
Okay, otherwise, JLC, I'm going to say we just give them a buy this year because they just got a new old CEO. Jerome Lambert, who was there from 2002 to 2013, came back on board. And Catherine Alex Renier, who did an okay job the last couple of years, she goes back to being CEO of Van Cleef, so she's still in the Richemont world. But Lambert was famous for the spectacular revival of the brand. Following Henry John Belmont's fundamental, and Gunter Blumlein's fundamental rehabilitation of the brand in the 90s and the 80s, Lambert took all of that latent potential with a supernova of success from the 2000s through about 2015 when the watches from his era finally reached the end of the pipeline. But there was not a whole lot of energy at JLC after 2015. There's a lot of treading water. Well, he just showed up last fall. Even if he brings back the same quality of product design, engineering, and complications for money, it's going to take a good solid 2 years to get there. So let's just give JLC a buy this year and say that we're hoping that the novelties are great, but we can't make any demands given the change in leadership.
I'm definitely okay with letting them breathe. You know, they had a decent year last year. They had some big releases, which I was very excited about.
The Duomets were pretty good.
They were. They really were. You know, I was bummed to see the German silver go away, but I really like the new Duomets a lot. And I'm excited for this chapter of JLC. I think they're going to. I'm hoping they right some wrongs of the late 2010s and COVID era, and kind of go back to that. Honestly, double aughts JLC.
Yeah, and I would say this too. The first step should be simplifying the catalog. Their website is a labyrinth.
Yes, so much yes.
It's hard to find what you want, and it seems like there are too many SKUs and too many variants, a bewildering array of watches with little differentiation. There's great stuff in there, but you have to be determined to make your way through JLC's website. You almost have to know what you want going in. So simplifying the collection and then improving website navigation would be like it would be like a double-barreled shot in the arm.